Welcome to the very first Divisionalysis video. I'm Fog, and I could start off by showing you a clickbait video like the one that's behind me, where I am deleting a named enemy in under a second. But that's not very helpful. Instead, I'm going to show you this build. And I'm sure you've got a lot of questions, but I am going to tell you why this is the most important build that I have ever made. I've got a lot of explaining to do. So grab your calculators, let's do some science. Right, damage in the division. How does it work? So first of all, we need to understand that there are different damage categories. So we have base weapon damage, so the damage that's integral to your weapon, and then we have added weapon damage, so some stuff that increases that weapon damage. So on this FAMAS, we'll see if I go down here and I turn the show base damage on, we go back, we can see that the 108.3k is made up of 44.2k base and 64.1k of added weapon damage. Now these numbers are rounded, just something else to consider, but the total being 108.3. So where does that damage come from? So your all weapon damage comes from your core attributes, so up to 15% per core. And then you also have your brand sets, which will give you a plus 5% weapon damage. You get that from Walker Harris, you can get that from Yargear as well. Then you have your specific weapon damage, or your weapon type damage. So on your AR, there it is, plus 15% assault rifle damage. You can also get that from brand sets. So Fenris gives you assault rifle damage, Petrov gives you LMG, Sokolov's gives you SMG, Douglas and Harding gives you pistol damage. You get the picture. You can also get specific weapon damage or weapon type damage from your specialization tree. So obviously making sure that you've got the right weapon type selected in there is important, and each one will give you an additional 15%. Then I've got this single weapon damage, but essentially that's expertise level, and it applies to the only weapon that you put that expertise on, but it goes under all weapon damage. And then we have weapon damage talents. So you will see here that each one of these weapon talents says plus weapon damage. So that's important. That plus sign means that it's additive. So it is adding weapon damage. So plus 20% weapon damage to bleeding enemies. Obviously this is all conditional, all weapon talents are. So weapon damage is increased by plus 3% for every 10% ammo. Plus 30% weapon damage. Or each stack grants 1% weapon damage. I haven't tested Catharsis, that might be one of my upcoming videos. So you can see Bloody Knuckles plus 25% weapon damage. We then have total weapon damage, another category altogether. So I've got little t, total weapon damage, and that's because when you see it written in descriptions, it comes with a little t. But what you will also notice is that there is no plus sign in front of the percentages. It is increasing total weapon by a percentage. So increases total weapon damage by 15%. Critical hits, total weapon damage by 1%. Increases total weapon damage by, increases total weapon damage by, I think you are getting the picture. Increases and by, but it always says total in white for some reason, but a little t, total weapon damage. And there's a lot of them. They're almost predominantly on gear sets. Chest and backpack. The only variation that I know of is measured. You can see here, total weapon damage. I think we've got the picture now. Here's measured. As you can see, the first half of the magazine has a negative sign, or the opposite of the plus sign, so that is just weapon damage. And then in the bottom half, no plus sign. Total weapon damage. So it goes from negative weapon damage to plus total weapon damage. Now, I will just warn you out that Strikers is glitched at the moment. It definitely says increase total weapon damage. So it should 100% be a total weapon damage talent. And I thought that they were going to fix this. They said they were going to fix this, but they didn't. And instead it's providing amplified damage. Different. It's circled here in red because amplified damage, if you have an amplified damage talent, it doesn't go within the box. It actually comes out of that box or that category and creates its own multiplier. Every single one of amplified damage creates its own multiplier, which makes it the most powerful type of damage in the game. Amplified damage. Where do you find it? How do you recognize it? Well, it's quite simple. It says that it's amplified. So here we got the Mantis, amplified by 50%. We've got the Diamondback, damage is amplified by 20%. We go on. Flatline amplifies weapon damage to pulsed enemies. Ranger amplifies weapon damage further away from a target that you are. Spotter amplifies. Another reason why Flatline and Spotter is powerful. 2 amplified. Perfect Glass Cannon, the only unconditional amplified damage. Opportunistic amplifies damage taken by the enemy. Here we have Hunter's Fury. So this one actually has 2 amplified talents in the one piece of gear, that 4th piece of gear. If you're within 15 meters, it amplifies the damage by 20%. But then if you kill one of the targets, it supplies you an additional amplified weapon damage bonus of 5% for 10 seconds, and that stacks up to 5 times, which makes it very, very powerful set. And the last damage I call impact damage. Once that amplified damage of the bullet has left the gun, it then comes down to what happens at the other end. That's impact damage. So it too is red, and it's divided into 3 categories. So you have multipliers within this category. So that's the red box versus the white box. Is that the red box has multiple multipliers. multiple multipliers. Anyway, where was the enemy hit? So essentially, was that enemy in cover or were they out of cover? Did you hit the armor, the health, or armor plates? Common misconception is that armor plates are in fact health damage. Not true. Subject of a future video. Did you hit them in the head, or was the hit critical? I think most people understand that that's determined by the critical hit chance, and then it's the multiplier being the critical hit damage. So there are so many different types of damage in this game, which makes some calculations very, very complicated because you are looking at so many different factors impacting. So there are a lot of conditional damage, so you have to understand, are those conditions being met at the time that the damage is being done? And then that damage, where does it belong? Is it weapon damage? Is it total weapon damage? Is it impact damage? So on and so forth. Once you know that, you have your base weapon damage. You simply multiply it by the weapon damage, so it's the +1, and all of those add together, additive, and then you multiply that by all of the total weapon damages, and again, each one of those is additive with each other. Then you have damage to armor, damage to health, and again, if you have multiple sources, it is additive, commonly referred to as multiplicative damage, armor and the rest of it, but not true. The category is multiplicative. Then you have your crit damage and your headshot damage, those two are additive together, and then it's detox, so damage to targets out of cover, additive, but amplified damage is always multiplicative. So if you have glass cannon, you have flatline, and you have a buff from a teammate survivalist, it's always going to be multiplying out. So there you have it, base weapon damage. So each one of those categories is multiplicative, and because of that, once you have the categories, you can swap them around, because 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 is the same as 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, or 1 times 3 times 2 times 4. You get the picture. You can then start swapping it out depending on whether the conditions are being met. Is it a headshot? Is it a crit? Is it a headshot crit? Is it health instead of armor? Is the amplified damage not applying? Are they out of cover? So once all that's sorted out, it's just a matter of multiplying it all out. So that brings me back to this build here, the test build, and why it's the most important build that I've created. Now, when you want to do science, you have to remove as many variables as you possibly can. So in this case, I have Survivalist. A Survivalist does not provide any damage buffs to a solo player. I'm using weapons without any damage talent. I also have gear pieces that don't have damage talents on them, and I also have a gear piece from each of the weapon types. Now that's going to become incredibly important when we're comparing weapon types against weapon types, and that's a long way in the future. We've got a long way to go between there, but I also have a chest gear piece, and that's in order to bring the build up to 60%, and I'm highlighting here that it's not quite optimized yet, which it will be when we come to do weapon comparisons. But the stats, you can see here 58.2, that'll come up to 60% when it's completely optimized. The crit hit damage at the moment is 139.2, but that will go to 141 when it's fully optimized. But as you can see, 75% headshot damage, 8% damage to armor, 21% health damage, that's from the assault rifle, 8% from the build, and what's never displayed is damage to targets out of cover, but we have that on both the weapon and also the foxes. 105% all weapon damage. You can see down the side there how that's actually constructed. We have 6 pieces of reds, so 6 15s are 90, plus 10% from the Keener's watch. And then we also have the 5% from the expertise, which makes it 105. And then we also have the 40% assault rifle damage coming from the specialization tree, the weapon itself, and the gear set being Fenris. 105 and 40. Those are the figures that we need to remember. So we're using a FAMAS. Now the FAMAS, as we saw before, 44.2k base weapon damage. Now that's rounded, as I said, and you can work out what the exact damage from each weapon is. In the case of the FAMAS, it is 44,191. Now we have 145% all weapon damage, so that's 105 plus the 40, and there's no damage talents on the weapon, so that's it, 145. 1.45 plus the 1, I'm assuming everybody understands how to multiply by percentages at this point. That gives us 108,268, which we already knew because it's actually displayed in our stats. Still important to do the calculation because you have those conditional talents. Total weapon damage, there is none. There's none on the gear, we removed all that. So we now have 8% damage to armor, or 1.08, so 108,268 times 1.08 is 116,929. And then we're going to the firing range, and every target is out of cover, so we've got our 10% from our weapon, our 8% from foxes, 1.18, and 116,929 times 1.18 is 137,976. So that is the damage to an out of cover and a hit on armor, 137,976. Now if we want to work out what's going to happen if we have a crit hit, or if we have a headshot, or if we have both, critical hit damage, so that's 139.2 at the moment, plus our 1 gives us 2.392. Headshots is 75%, or a multiplier of 1.75. Now if we want to have a crit headshot, we have to add both of those together. Those two stats are additive, and that comes out at 3.142 when you add in the 1. So 137,976 times 2.392 is 330,039 as we go down the list. There we have it. So we have a crit headshot, and then a headshot non-crit. There it is. So on my test build, on a shot on armor, and if the target is out of cover, we should see those numbers. Well, let's take it to the firing range, and let's find out. Here we are. That quick swivel showed you it was an heroic. Here we go. veteran. Let's go all the way to named. I generally do most of my testing on named elites, so we're definitely going to be hitting armor straight up. I'm going to set this at 5 meters. It would be embarrassing if I missed, so let's make it as close as possible. Here those figures again. There it is, 137976. Let's see what a crit does. There it is, 330. Oh, we're out by 1, but if you go back and do the maths with the non-rounded figures, you'll see why. There it is, 433, 520, followed by 241, 58. Damage. Seems pretty simple. It gets a lot more complicated when you start adding in talents and whether they are conditional, so if are those conditions being met at the time that that damage is actually being done. This is me actually using that test build, so just to prove to you that you don't have to have damage talents in order to be able to clear heroic content. This build itself, it deals enough damage, especially if the target is out of cover, and you can see some of the difference as I go through this footage. When they're not out of cover, that 18% multiplicative, so the damage category, the total 18%, you can see the difference. But in future videos, what we need to do is then work out what DPS is, because that is another beast in and of itself, and we'll start to look at some of the other factors that play on damage in this game. So, but at this point in time, you should have a solid enough understanding about damage numbers for you to go back and have a look at some of your gear, do some analysis yourself. And like I said, in the next video, where we look at DPS, things get a little bit more complicated, but once you grasp these basics, it all makes sense in the end. So enjoy the rest of this gameplay, and if you want to see more stuff like this, like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you in the next one.
Target is
medical assistance needed. Serious trauma detected.